Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Wednesday, July 10th. Hopefully everybody is having a good day so far today. 3 days into the week and 3 straight episodes here on the podcast. Appreciate you all joining me. This is episode 323 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you as always for tuning in, both on all the audio podcast platforms and, of course, those of you tuning in on YouTube. Make sure to please like and subscribe as we are continuing to chase our goal of 1,000 subscribers by week number 1. Jets Niners, we are another day closer to training camp, another day closer to week 1 of the NFL season. So continue to count down the days here as the New York Jets and, of course, all of the NFL gets closer and closer to the 2024 season. Hopefully, it's a good one. But today I want to break down some news that came out yesterday. Davante Adams said that Aaron Rodgers is still trying to recruit him. He is still in his ear about potentially reuniting again at some point in their career, maybe this season with the New York Jets at some point. So I wanted to break that down today on the podcast, break down the comments, show you the clip, and if this is something that could actually happen, because to be honest, Davante Adams to the New York Jets has kind of been talked about a little bit amongst the fan base over the last year, I would say, ever since the Aaron Rodgers trade went down last April. Davante Adams has been linked to the New York Jets as a possible trade candidate. And now this year, with hopefully a healthy Rodgers, we could see potentially a November 5th trade deadline blockbuster deal where maybe Davante Adams finishes out the year in the gang green, in the green and white with Aaron Rodgers. So we'll see. We'll break it all down. Before we begin, though, I want to tell you about our podcast sponsor, Huga House. Head on down to the link in the description down below. Click that link. That'll take you to the Huga House store where you can shop from a wide range of different hats. They have just released 10 brand new hats. So if you want to get your hands on one of the 10 brand new hats, or the hat that I'm wearing right now, or any of the hats that Aaron Rodgers rocks, or even Shane Gillis, who's actually wearing the same hat that I'm wearing right now, when you find a hat, any of the hats that I'm wearing, Aaron Rodgers, or the 10 brand new hats, or any of the other hats they have at their store, head on down, click the link in the description down below. When you find a hat at checkout, use promo code BUBS for 15% off your purchase. Get yourself some Huga House swag, help support the podcast. And if you want to rock what QB1's rocking, Aaron Rodgers, head on over, use promo code BUBS for 15% off your purchase. Click the link in the description down below and get yourself some swag. All right, now let's get into today's podcast. So yesterday, Aaron Rodgers, or rather, Davante Adams, was on the Up and Adams show with Kay Adams discussing many different things. But one of the topics that came up during the interview was Aaron Rodgers still trying to recruit him, still in his ear about potentially reuniting at some point in their career. Here is the clip of Davante Adams speaking on Aaron Rodgers and a potential reunion at some point.
You two are boys, a lot of love for each other. You went to the Derby together. We see the pictures on the Instagram. Are you telling me he's not getting your ear and saying, hey, I want to play with you again?
Oh, he's in that ear, that's for sure. he's in the ear, but it's not as easy as it. Obviously we can get together and talk about the old times and potential of doing this and that. But like I said, I'm a Raider, so and he knows that. So we'll maybe the next.
He's in that ear for sure. That was one of the main takeaways from this interview, from that 29-second clip that I just showed you there, that Aaron Rodgers is clearly talking to Davante Adams. They've been together a lot this offseason. As Kay Adams mentioned, they were at the Kentucky Derby together. There was just a recent photo of them on Instagram of them together, even David Bakhtiari, a couple different guys, a couple different teammates from their days in Green Bay all together. So they've spent a lot of time together. And even last year when the Jets visited the Raiders in Vegas, I believe they actually went out to dinner the night before, or 2 nights before, whatever, that Sunday, before that Sunday night game, Rodgers and Davante Adams went out. So they've been very close. They obviously still stay in touch. And like I said, this has kind of been something that Jets fans have talked about, Davante Adams has been linked to the Jets really ever since the Rodgers trade went down, because last year you had Davante Adams, or I should say 2022, you had Davante Adams play with his former college teammate Derek Carr. And then you go into the 2023 offseason, of course, Carr moved, the Raiders, you had that kind of messy breakup there towards the end. He moves on, goes to the Saints. The Jets bring in Rodgers, and everybody's thinking, man, at the deadline this year, the New York Jets could potentially go out and trade for Davante Adams because it's a messy situation. You had, of course, McDaniel getting fired middle of the year, or McDaniel on the hot seat entering the season. He ended up getting fired. If Rodgers never got hurt, maybe it would have been something that would have ended up getting done. Either way, Antonio Pierce comes in as the interim coach. He gets placed with the long-term tag on him. And here we are entering the 2024 season, and the New York Jets and Davante Adams are linked once again. And this is something that could definitely possibly happen. You enter from, we'll look at the Raiders and Davante Adams side of things first, and then we'll kind of take a look at the Jets side of things second here when it comes down to the Raiders, the Jets, and if something would to potentially get done between these two teams. Davante Adams, obviously, we all know, still an elite player, still one of the elite receivers in football. Last season with very, very poor quarterback play. I mean, he had Aiden O'Connell, Jimmy Garoppolo playing there for a little while. He had Brian Hoyer out there as well. But primarily, it was Aiden O'Connell to close out the season. And similar to Garrett Wilson, he was a guy that had to deal with bad quarterback play after playing with Aaron Rodgers for the first 8 years of his career, and even having a season of Derek Carr where before he really kind of fell off when he went to New Orleans last year, Carr was still a solid quarterback during his years in Las Vegas and, of course, Oakland as well. But last season, Davante Adams had 103 receptions, 1,144 yards, 11.1 yards per reception, and 8 touchdowns. So this was still a guy that, while he's 31 years old, and he'll be 32 near the end of this season, he'll turn 32 in December, and he's kind of near the end of his prime, he is still one of the elite receivers in football. And he's been dealing with below average quarterback play all of last year, and he'll deal with below average quarterback play entering this season as well, as the Raiders enter the year with a quarterback competition between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew during camp for the right to become the starter in week number 1. But you look at those numbers, he was still tied for 10th in the NFL last year in receptions. He was 15th in yards and 8th in touchdowns. Tied for 8th in touchdowns with 8. So still a guy that is a top 10, top 5 when he's at his best receiver in football. And this is also a guy that had 1,500 yards in 2022. Durable, has played 34 games over the last 2 years, all 17 games in each of the last 2 seasons. He's reliable. He's one of the best in the game. There's no concern about Davante Adams nearing the end, even though you look at the age and say, oh, he's 31, going to be 32, he's nearing the end of his prime, all that stuff. No, the numbers are still there. He's had 10,781 career yards. The dude has been one of the best receivers in the game since he entered the league in 2014. So if he's available, you 100% do it with the New York Jets. That's the point I'm trying to get at. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If Davante Adams becomes available and Aaron Rodgers wants him and the Jets have the pieces to do it, you 100% pull the trigger, because Davante Adams is still one of the elite receivers in football. You look at his numbers in the 8 years with Green Bay, we know what he's done. 669 receptions, 8,121 yards, 12.1 yards per reception, 73 touchdowns during his time with Aaron Rodgers. Just an absolute beast over those 8 years. Now, from the Raiders' perspective, again, it's going to be interesting to see how this ends up panning out. Now, as I've said a couple times, I don't think this, if I had to tell you right now, if I'm guessing right now on July 10th, does this deal happen in November, deadline day, the Jets strike a deal, Davante Adams is a New York Jet, he makes his debut, and he makes his debut right after the deadline in that Week 10 matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. And, the New York Jets and Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams are ready to go, going to the Super Bowl, all that stuff. I wouldn't say that. I don't think Davante Adams will end up getting traded mid-year to the Jets. I just don't see it happening. Now, prove me wrong, have it happen, but would be such a massive, massive deal, and a lot has to go in the Jets' favor. On paper, the Raiders aren't a team that you look at and say, man, they're going to have a good season, or man, this is a team that's going to be a borderline playoff team. I think at best they're probably an 8-9 team, maybe 7-10. Maybe if you get some year 2 jump out of Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, who won 9 games last year with the Indianapolis Colts, could maybe pull a 9th game out. But I still don't think they're a playoff team, and they're still a team that potentially by the deadline could be looked as sellers. And a lot of what this is going to come down to is what the Raiders look like by week 9, which the Tuesday after week 9, which will be November 5th, is when the deadline is. And actually that is the Raiders bye week, is entering that week 10. And you look at the Raiders schedule, it's not terrible to start. You have the Chargers, which is winnable. The Ravens will be tough. They'll probably lose. You probably beat Carolina. They can be 2-1. Cleveland, let's give them a loss. You probably beat Denver. That's 3-3. And then you have a stretch of Pittsburgh, Rams, Kansas City, Cincinnati. I think in order for this deal to get done, or this to be a realistic option when the deadline comes around, the Raiders probably need to be 3-6 or worse, because I think if they are 4-5, or even, of course, if they're 5-4, they're definitely not moving on. But if they're 4-5, unless if Davante Adams is really unhappy, and if he is really unhappy, and I know right now they like Antonio Pierce, but Antonio Pierce is still in the honeymoon phase, right? Last year was so bad to start the season under Josh McDaniel that Antonio Pierce came in. They started winning a little bit. They went into Kansas City, of course, beat the Chiefs, we know, on Christmas Day. They had a couple big wins. They kind of got themselves back into the playoff race where they were 7-8 at one point and still had a chance. Still were holding on by a thread. And he's still in the honeymoon phase, right? We still need to see what Antonio Pierce is for an entire season. Davante Adams, 5 weeks in, might be fed up if Aiden O'Connell is not making any progress, or Gardner Minshew is playing average football at best, and the Raiders are 1-4, and Antonio Pierce seems in over his head. Because now it's down to business for Antonio Pierce. Like, he was in the honeymoon phase last year. They were winning. They were beating up on some poor teams. They, of course, beat the Chiefs, which was big on the road, all that stuff. But now it's like, the honeymoon phase is over. Now you got to go out there and win. Now you got to go out there and continue this, keep this consistent, because we've seen interim coaches in the past have early success and then they can't continue it. So we'll see what happens. But I think this team would have to be 3-6 most likely, unless if Davante Adams is really, really unhappy. If they're 3-6, they're 2-7, they're definitely moving on. Anything worse, 1-8, you're definitely moving on. I don't think they're that bad. I think at worst they'll probably be 3-6, maybe 2-7. But what's interesting is their final 3 games before the deadline, before their bye week, it's the Rams, Chiefs, Bengals. Those are all 3 difficult games, and two of those are on the road. The Rams will be on the road and the Bengals will be on the road. So you probably lose, let's say you lose those 3 games, and then you probably lose to Baltimore. That's automatically 4 losses in their first 9 games. You can also see them losing to Cleveland, and you can also see them losing to Pittsburgh. Now, Cleveland and Pittsburgh are home. Could they potentially split one of those games? Russell Wilson isn't as good as, Russell Wilson maybe continues to regress and Pittsburgh's really struggling. Maybe they beat Pittsburgh and they get a 4th win there. But most likely you're looking at their easy games in their schedule are the Chargers, Carolina, and Denver. And the Chargers could potentially beat them. They're on the road too for that. But those are probably 3 wins. After that, it's kind of toss-ups. Like Cleveland, Pittsburgh's kind of a toss-up. I think they would probably lose to Cleveland. Pittsburgh's a toss-up. I don't see them beating Baltimore, the Rams, the Chiefs, or the Bengals, especially because Baltimore, Rams, and Bengals are all on the road. Those are all 3 tough road environments to go into for a team that's probably 8 wins at best. Especially very good defenses as well for either of Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew to go up against. So, their schedule early on is kind of favorable, but after that Cleveland, Denver stretch, really after that Denver game, it gets pretty difficult. And if they're 3-6, I think the door is open. Now, third round pick, the Jets acquired that from the Lions, of course, in the draft, which could be a key factor in all of this because we've seen in the past deadline deals get done where third round picks are second round picks are sometimes what gets dealt. You don't always see a big deal happen at the deadline where a first round pick is involved. A lot of times, sometimes all it takes is a third round, maybe a second round pick to get this deal done. I know some people might not be willing to give up a second round pick, but that's right now. How desperate are the Jets? And that's the Jets angle on all this. We went through the Raiders angle, right? We know what Davante Adams is. He's still one of the elite receivers. We know what the Raiders are this year. They are a team with a new head coach. They've got hope, but they still have questions at quarterback. And on paper, talent-wise, they don't have a ton of talent. They are probably at best a 7-8 win team. And depending on where they are at the deadline, if they're 3-6 or 2-7, they're going to look to sell. And Davante Adams could become unhappy. And Davante Adams hasn't won a ring either. He's going to be 32 years old. If he has a chance, if he looks at the Jets and they're 8-2 or 7-3, let's say, and he looks at the Jets and says, man, they're flying. They're dominating. Rodgers is back to form. I want to go there. They'll make it happen. The Raiders will make it happen. The Jets will make it happen. Both sides would agree. He's that type of elite player that can kind of have leverage on the situation to go return with his former teammate. Now, the Jets angle of this is interesting because how much would you want to give up? And also, how desperate would the Jets be in that situation? If the Jets are, let's say Mike Williams isn't playing up to his standard and the torn ACL seems to be affecting him more than we'd expect. And let's say Xavier Gipson isn't taking kind of a year two leap and Malachi Corley's kind of going through some rookie struggles and Allen Lazard is Allen Lazard of last year. Maybe if anything, just slightly better, but still not anything good. And it's really just Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall and Tyler Conklin leading the loads, leading the team, carrying the load, I should say, like last year, then you could see the Jets becoming a little bit more desperate. Now, I still stand in the boat of even if Mike Williams is producing and even if Malachi Corley, let's say, is playing really well as a rookie, and let's say Xavier Gipson's taking a year two leap, and let's say even Allen Lazard is slightly better, I still would be in the boat of it's Davante Adams. He's a elite talent. He is one of the best receivers this game has seen in the last decade. You have a chance to go all in. You have a chance to win a championship. I don't care about the picks. I'm all in. If you have a Mike Williams playing at a high level and Garrett Wilson's playing at an elite level and you add Davante Adams, I mean, a trio of Mike Williams, Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson, and if like Corley and Gipson are producing well, they don't have to be producing high, great numbers, but if they're doing well enough, and then Breece Hall and Tyler Conklin and this offensive line and a Hall of Fame quarterback, who's stopping that team in the postseason? Nobody. So I still would be in the boat. And I know some Jets, and again, that's what it's all about, right? Maybe the Jets, if their receiving core is great, maybe the defense is struggling. Or maybe the defense took some hits where somebody went down up front and they need another edge rusher or whatever. And maybe they use those picks. Maybe they use the deadline to acquire an edge rusher and get their version of a Von Miller like the Rams had when they won the Super Bowl over going out and spending it on Davante Adams if they're getting good production out of the receiving core. So again, this is all a wait and see game. This is going to happen, if anything, 9 weeks into the NFL season. 9 weeks is more than half the year. That's a lot of football that needs to be played before we even would see this happen. Training camp hasn't even happened. So a lot still needs to go down. But that's kind of the basis of what would need to be. I think in order the Jets to make this move, I think you would need to see some struggles out of the receiving core. And you probably wouldn't have any other needs elsewhere. Like you couldn't have any other major injuries on defense or any other major injuries on offense where you would need to have picks to potentially go out and deal for other pieces. Everything else would have to be pretty perfect, and you would have to hope that, the receiving core is also you'd kind of, it's tough. It's tough because even if Mike Williams is playing great, do the Jets go out there and still bring in Davante? You have to see. It really kind of be something where you'd have to see where this team's at. But, yeah, I mean, and of course, an injury to receiving core too would probably promote this trade as well. But a lot still needs to happen. From the Raiders side, they need to be bad. So you need to root for the Raiders to struggle. From the Jets side, they need to be pretty clear elsewhere at every other position so they don't have to deal for somebody there. Like if a defensive player takes a hit this year, a defensive group takes a hit this year, instead of having to use picks on that, if your receiving core is not the main problem, you would need, the Jets can get a little greedy there, where even if the receiving core is playing well, they could still go on and add Davante Adams because they see the vision. They see, man, we've got Super Bowl Davante Adams is only going to elevate us. We'll see. Third round pick probably. And look, the Jets did this in 2009 when they acquired Braylon Edwards from Cleveland that year. So this is something that the New York Jets have done in the past. Of course, they haven't been in position to do so since, because they haven't been in the playoff conversation really over the last couple of years, specifically the Douglas era. But we'll see. Let me know your comments let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'm all in on the move. If Davante Adams is available and the New York Jets are rolling and they have a chance to get Davante Adams, a realistic shot, like the Raiders are legitimately looking to move on from him, you 100% do the deal. You're here to win a Super Bowl. You're here to go all in. That's an all-in move. That's kind of the final cherry on top. But again, it takes two to tango. If the Raiders are 4-5, they might not want to move on. If the New York Jets are content with their receiving core and they're getting good production, they might not want to spend assets. They might feel confident in what they have. And maybe they want to spend assets elsewhere at the deadline if somebody takes a hit on the defensive side of the football or something like that at another position that could use more help. If the receiving core is maybe exceeding expectations, or everything that could go good could happen, or everything that could be positive instead of everything going wrong, like Mike Williams is playing well and Xavier Gibson's playing well and all those things are clicking, then maybe you don't see the deal. But either way, Davante Adams on the Jets, I'd totally see it. Once again, tell you about our podcast partner, Huga House. Head on down to the link in the description down below. Use promo code BUBS for 15% off your purchase. Any purchase you make, use promo code BUBS for 15% off. Get yourself some of the swag that Aaron Rodgers rocks, Shane Gillis, even myself. Help support the pod and get yourself some Huga House swag. So that'll do it. Let me know in the comment section down below. What are your thoughts on the Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers recruitment process, or Aaron Rodgers recruiting Davante Adams process? Joe Douglas, fast forward to week 9, get the deal done. I'd be all on board, and I think Jets fans would too. Thank you for watching. Until next time, Jets, 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 Jets.